Hey, how's it going? My name is Wes. Welcome back to another lesson. In today's lesson, we have another green fundamentals lesson. And this is already lesson number 46 in total and part 6 of the fundamentals lessons. So fundamentals part 6, let's dive right into it. Alright, so as always, we will be learning some helpful words and phrases in these green fundamentals lessons. So let's start with the first word of today's lesson, which is a question. A question.
Una pregunta. Una pregunta.
So now we already learned the word for I have, which was tengo. So if you now want to say I have a question, you say tengo una pregunta. I have a question.
Tengo una pregunta. Tengo una pregunta.
So tengo una pregunta, I have a question, and una pregunta is a question. Alright, the next word is bien, which means good in Spanish.
Bien. Bien.
And if we learn the word good, then we of course also should learn the word for bad. So bad in Spanish is mal.
Mal. Mal.
So bien, good, and mal, bad. And now that we know the words for good and bad, bien y mal, there's also two expressions that we can learn, which is que bien y que mal. Que bien, que mal, which means how good or how bad. And it's used as an expression. So if someone says something that is good, then you say, que bien, how good. And if someone, for example, talks about something bad that happened to them, you can say, que mal, how bad.
Qué bien. Qué mal.
So bien, good, mal, bad, que bien, how good, and que mal, how bad. And these sentences, que bien y que mal, you might hear other people around you use those expressions. Que bien, how good, and que mal, how bad. Alright, the next word that we will learn is una cosa.
Una cosa. Una cosa.
And this means a thing. So a thing, in general, a thing.
Una cosa.
Then the next word is a very, very, very helpful word in Spanish, which in English translates to there is or there are. And this word is hay.
Hay. Hay.
So for example, if you say hay una cosa, then you would be saying there is a thing. So hay, there is or there are. So hay gente is there are people, for example. Hay, this is a very, very, very frequently used word, so make sure to learn this one for sure. Alright, the next word is hasta.
Hasta. Hasta.
Which means until or to. So for example, in the word hasta mañana, which means until tomorrow. So hasta, until, mañana, tomorrow. Until tomorrow, hasta mañana.
Hasta mañana.
Alright, the next word is therefore.
Por eso. Por eso.
And this is quite a helpful word as well. And before, we had a look at the most frequently used conjunctions in Spanish, and I'm not sure if we went over this one. If we didn't, then make sure to add this maybe to your list as well. But very useful and commonly used phrase in Spanish. Therefore.
Por eso.
Alright, then the next word of today's fundamentals lesson is nadie, which means nobody.
Nadie. Nadie.
So hay nadie, as we saw before, hay meant there is or there are, and nadie is nobody. So hay nadie means there is nobody. Hay nadie. So nadie, nobody. And then if we learn nobody, of course we also need to learn somebody or someone. So the word for someone in Spanish is alguien.
Alguien. Alguien.
Someone. So nadie and alguien. And then we can actually use this first part of alguien, which is someone, so we can use a stem or that first part of that word, and we can turn it into algo, which means something. So not someone, alguien, but algo is something.
Algo. Algo.
Alright, and then the next word we will learn in today's lesson is
Todo. Todo.
which means all or everything. And todo is also one of these words which is very popular and very commonly used, which I highly recommend you to learn as well. Alright, then the next word is pues.
Pues. Pues.
And the word pues can have different meanings depending on the context. It can mean for, because, or so. So pues, for, because, or so. Depends on the context of the sentence. Alright, and then the last 3 words of today's lesson. The first one is así.
Así. Así.
Which also has different meanings. It can mean so, thus, or that's. So, for example, in the sentence, así es como me siento cuando escucho esa canción.
Así es como me siento cuando escucho esa canción.
Así es como, that's how, me siento, I feel, cuando, when, escucho, which comes from the verb escuchar. So, I hear or I listen, esa canción, that song. So, así es como me siento cuando escucho esa canción. That's how I feel when I hear that song. So, así, depending on the context, means so, thus, or that's. And it's also one of those words that you will come across quite regularly in Spanish. So make sure to learn this word. Alright, and then the last word of today's green lesson, which is guapo or guapa. And this would translate to something as pretty or handsome in English. However, this is seen as a compliment. So it's used as a compliment. And it doesn't necessarily have a romantic meaning attached to it. So you might hear people say, estás guapo, estás guapa, which means you are pretty or handsome. It doesn't really mean pretty or handsome. I'm not sure if there is a good translation in English for the word guapo or guapa. So again, guapo is if we talk to, so if I would talk to a man, I would say guapo. If I would talk to a female, I would say guapa. So for example, you might hear someone say this to an elderly lady when she walks by, of like saying, hey, you're pretty, or you look good today. And I really like this word in Spanish because you can give someone a compliment without necessarily having that romantical touch to it. You can just tell someone, hey, you look good today. So, guapo, guapa.
Guapo. Guapa.
Alright, and with this last word, guapo or guapa, we've made it to the end of this green fundamentals lesson, part number 6. Again, as always, I hope that this was helpful to you. I hope you learned some new words in today's lesson. Make sure to download the reference sheet of today's lesson if you want to practice with these words. And yeah, that's about it. That's it for this lesson. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, I hope to see you in the next one. Adios.